Actually, let me grab you and take you over to the sofa so I can get cozy. Get comfy and cozy. That was what while we were working on Oranges and Lemons, we had a joke about calling the album Love Comfy. Yeah, after Love Sexy by Prince. So we thought Oranges and Lemons is going to be a Love Comfy.
What you call that noise?
The XTC Podcast.
XTClimelight.com.
What do you call that noise?
Hello everybody, my name is Mark Fisher. I have been writing about XTC since longer than anybody can remember, since I was in short trousers, and the man responsible for this terrible abuse of my work since I was 16 or something is Andy Partridge, and Andy Partridge is with us now. Andy, how are you?
Oh, no, I'm not with you at all. No, I'm not with you. I'm not going to be with you. You've been writing about us forever, before pencils were invented, I think.
I think we had to invent the pencil so that I could write about you.
Yeah, you were blowing ochre through your hand onto a cave wall in patterns that were all about XTC.
That's exactly right. And still you exploit me, and still here I am 57 years later.
Yes. I'm going to let you go.
Well, Andy, welcome to the what do you call that noise? The XTC Podcast, which has been great fun to do. This technically is episode 2.5. I think we've got another one that we're due to do later in the week, and it's been tremendous to talk about you. But how do you find the idea that people might still be talking about you and XTC all these years? After the last album,
I think they should get a life. No, it's very nice. It's very warming, actually. That's the word I would use. It's very warming. It's really lovely to know that despite Virgin EMI Universal losing your tapes, it's nice to know that your music has been liked and enjoyed over the years by so many people. It's unimaginable, As a kid, I thought, yeah, I'd like to be in a pop group and have girls chase me down the street like the Beatles or the Monkees or whatever. And then when you become an adult, you're not interested in that. I want to make that connection with people. I want to build those little bridges to see if people can use the things I can carve out of words and chords and things.
And I don't know if you're aware, but there's a thing about making plans for Nigel in today's Guardian, actually, and the online version of it. It's Colin and Terry have been interviewed about it, but the online version, if you go below the line, which is normally a thing that you should be very scared of.
Going below the line is where the best stuff always is.
But the last time I looked, which was probably yesterday, there was already something like 80 comments, and every single one of them was, XTC are the best band ever, they're the most underrated, whatever, and it was quite remarkable, actually, given that the sort of contentious nature of pop music, that there was such a sort of outpouring of love.
Of grief.
Of grief, yeah.
Well, that's very warming. And it's just a little bit sad that we got to be on the verge of knocking on death's door before people will go, you know what, they were a good band.
Yeah. And
you know what I've been doing today? I'm a little bit hoarse because I've been singing along, but I forced my distorted and split warped door open today and got into the shed. I daren't close it because I'll never get out again, and I don't want it to be my mausoleum in there. But I've been transferring, doing a project where I've been transferring every bootleg of live XTC I can get my hands on. Many of them have been cheekily sent to me in the past, by people. Hey, Andy, look what I'm doing. I'm selling your music and you can't stop it. Ha ha. And we'll see who has the last laugh. But I've been listening to this outrageous early live stuff, 77, 78, 79. And Jesus, we were one fierce band live.
I agree. I saw you twice in the 1980, 82, whatever, just before you stopped touring, and that was, you were my entry drug to the world of live music, because I think you were the first band that I saw, and really, my memory might be distorted, but you were at the top, so I really did start at the top.
So everyone else was a terrible disappointment.
It's like a life of disappointment ever since.
No, you don't realize how fierce this hurricane is when you're at the eye of it. And when you're at the eye of it, you just it's like a weird calm. And you can see everything going on around you, but you don't realize that you're sat in the cockpit of this unearthly flying saucer type device that is making these fierce, fierce is the word. I playing these things this afternoon, putting them into the computer and blah, 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 just sort of cataloging them all. And I'm thinking, whoa, listen to that. That would scare me away from a venue.
It would.
If I was this age now or slightly younger and seeing a band that sounded like that, I would probably run screaming from the venue with a trauma incident. But so it's really fierce stuff, and I hadn't realized how fierce and how tight and shocking it was.
Do you think there was a moment when XTC clicked from a live point of view and became that sort of machine that was just relentless and didn't pause? You didn't pause in between songs. It was just bang, 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 bang. It was tremendously impressive. Was there a point when you suddenly got that?
No, I don't think I got it at all while we were functioning live. I think it took me many years away from it to not nostalgically look at it, but to think, oh yeah, we did that at one time. That was really the soul. It was like making records. It was almost like almost an afterthought or something. It was the playing live that was the real important stuff. And but today I had a little bit of a mini revelation playing this music, which I found kind of unearthly and scaring.
And was there a point early on, like, whether I don't know whether it would be Helium Kids days or early XTC, where you went from being whatever you might call yourselves, a sort of ramshackle pub rock band into being professional, I suppose is one word that you could use for it, but as efficient as a working live band can be.
Well, funny you should bring up the Helium Kids, because I've also, yesterday I was going through some Helium Kids recordings I had. I'm not too sure where the hell they're from, and I was seeing if I could cheer them up with little compression and EQ and limiting and blah blah, see if I could get them to sound a bit more decent to my ears. And even though they're kind of turgid and sludgy, there's still more energy than a lot of bands around in 1973, 1974.
Who probably were actually called turgid and sludgy. They were a prog rock group at the time, weren't they?
That's right. 50-minute bass solo, 50-minute Hammond organ solo, 50 minutes scratch board solo. No, so I've been kind of, how shall I say, what's the word? Sort of museuming. What's the word I'm looking for?
Archiving.
Archiving, that's the word.
And is that what you are doing? Have you got any intention to do anything with this stuff?
I knew you'd ask me this. Well,
you brought it up.
I'm not going to tell you, but it'll be good. It'll be good. I've had, especially hearing some of the early live 77, 78, 79 stuff. We made a big leap in sort of, how shall I say, intentional professionalism when Dave came on board. But there was, and to some extent, we were slightly less original. That's not Dave's fault. That's nobody's fault. That's just which way we were going. We were tired of the angular, spiky, stab you in the ears stuff by then. We'd done 2 years of it. But being away from hearing that stuff from 77, 78, I was a little shocked and delighted.
Well, does it feel like being, listening to another band, because it was so long ago now?
Oh yeah, it's another planet. I feel like I'm his great-great-grandfather. This skinny, hairy kid with, and inevitably my voice is shot and hoarse. it's even worse than it is now, because you've been touring forever, and you're totally blowing your voice, uh, and you're constantly trying to get your breath in between doing stage announcements, which can be very cryptic because your brain is going at 1,000 miles an hour, despite the Valium, going 1,000 miles, despite the beer and Valium, it's going 1,000 miles an hour, and you're garbling hoarsely some gibberish in between these fierce slabs, these oral sculptures made of broken glass.
I'm glad you're saying this because I definitely have that memory of listening to bootlegs, probably not just by you, but all kinds of live stuff, and you're kind of thinking, what are they saying? What is that noise they're making between songs?
Yeah, a lot of it is just out of breath. You just, and you're trying to.
And was there a fear as well? Because like that degree of energy and also coming out of that punk era where it was de rigueur to pogo and spit and all the rest of it, was there a sort of fear that you just had to plough your way through to keep people's attention? You didn't want to do a sort of long-winded introduction in the middle of a song because you might just lose everybody.
To some extent, but the fear, if anything, was not of the energy from the crowd or even the spitting, or is your amp going to give up the ghost or anything like that. The fear is just old-fashioned, the number one phobia going, which is public speaking, public engagement.
Mm-hmm.
I think that and spiders are still number 1 and 2 in the phobia charts. So you're sat in the dressing room and you get that classical, you get really tired before you're about half an hour before you're due on stage. And we'd be laying out, sleeping. And people say, "What, really? You thought you'd be all amped up?" And no, what happens? And I thought I was insane going, falling asleep a few minutes before being due on stage. And I read Pete Townsend said that, yeah, he'd come over really sleepy a few moments before they had to go on stage, and he'd fall asleep for a few moments. So it must be a body protection thing. But yet the spitting was horrendous. That was just something, the blinding scum storm of gob that you had to plow through. And it was really something made up by newspapers.
It's amazing that it ever happened at all, isn't it? You kind of think, did that really happen?
No, I know. And it's because you're running, it's like you're in 2 different time zones. The audience is in one time zone, and they're all bouncing up and down in slow motion. And then they're throwing stuff at you, and here comes a can of beer, spinning, spinning, spinning in ultra slow motion through the air. So you just move your head aside because you're moving. Time is like normal for you, but you've got so much adrenaline in you. It appears as if everything's going slow motion for them, and like you're observing your audience. The film of your audience is running cranked way down slow. We did a gig in Scotland somewhere, some university, was it Dundee or somewhere? We drove 13 hours through snowdrifts to get to this gig, and it was some like the last night, the dance of the last night of the year or whatever. And they had massive stacks of beer cans free for the students because everyone was out of their skulls. Free beer. And they were so drunk and bored with drinking beer, they were picking these cans out, ring pulling like a hand grenade, and throwing full cans of beer at us. But they were coming over in slow motion, and you had no trouble dodging them because everything off of the stage and outside of the 4 of the band is running in slow motion. You're at normal speed, but to them you're ultra fast.
So it didn't make you aggressive in return. It was because your head was just in a different place altogether.
Yeah. You're trying to remember what the next line is, the next chord, and the next thing you've got to do. Or and you can see that you can see missiles coming over, and you can dodge most of them. Occasionally, one will catch you blindsided, but. And sometimes you're on stage and you're in a kind of Zen state, and you I've said this before, but sometimes you'd be on stage and you'd disappear into a kind of meditation, and you'd be like dreaming and thinking, I wonder what sort of furniture I shall go for when I'm older. Will I like leather chairs, or will it be like tapestry backed chairs, or if I ever make any money at this game, will I go and collect 1950s furniture, the sort of stuff my parents had. And you find yourself drifting off into these weird Zen dreams. And then, of course, you come back, you think, oh, this is the chorus. I'm singing this in harmony with Colin. And it sort of jolts you, you don't miss a cue, but you drop into these microscopic dream states.
And I suppose because you were playing so much, it was like 3/4 of the year you'd be on the road. So I can imagine that happening. It was just that thing of repetition. It must be like muscle memory, or whatever the phrase would be.
Yeah. In fact, most of the songs of XTC's I can remember to play are the ones that were the most complex ones that we played live a lot. I can't remember how to play anything from the not live albums, or hardly anything from that. But I've still got every part of Roads Girdle the Globe seared laser-like into my muscle memory.
You're the only one. You're the only one in the world who knows how to play that song.
I can still play it now. I can remember every bit of it because it was so complex, and we played it so many times. And you think, well, I don't want to fuck this up. I got to remember this properly, And Dave's doing his kind of weaving in bit as well. It's like this weird metal tapestry we're doing. But I can still play it now. I'm not going to sing it, but an acoustic guitar. The intro is something like. You see what I mean?
Yeah,
Then we get. And so on. Then the verse goes. And so on, but and I don't know why I can still remember those, because they're all non-chords, or they're all chords that would have very long, fancy names, and none of which I know what they're called.
And with that song in particular, this is such a privilege, by the way. I'm just sitting here getting a personal gig from Andy Partridge.
It is just that stupid thing of why on earth would I remember all the difficult to play things from the live years. But nothing that's even more difficult possibly from the studio years, because you know that you've only got to get those right once.
And on the theme of difficulty, was it with Roads Girdle the Globe, as a band, did you ever just think, well, oh yeah, fine, putting it on drums and wires, but we won't actually play it live, or were you just willing enough to give it a go?
I really wanted to get that out live. It was a joy to play live, because when Terry hit that kind of stately pace, it felt nice on the body. It was a break from some of the more frantic, jagged stuff.
And that thing about what you've been doing today, listening back to those
sort of
things.
Archiving stuff, really cataloguing, archiving, thinking, wow, where did they get that gig from? Or what sneaky little bugger had recording equipment at the back of the room in that gig? So I'm just amazed the stuff I have that I didn't realize I had, that people had sent me.
And the bootleggers, I remember the bootleggers getting incredibly sophisticated. I remember going to gigs where you would be on your way out to the gig, and they already somehow had the tapes that they were selling to the people on the way out, and they somehow managed to produce them. It doesn't.
Well, I remember doing a show. I think it was in Washington, and the tour manager at the time was Paul Bailey, not Pearl Bailey. That's a famous spelling mistake of Paul Bailey. Paul Bailey, we were sort of toweling down and getting dressed. All the sweaty clothes were in a big pile in the corner, sodden, sweaty. We're putting on fresh T-shirts and jeans and stuff. And he came in with boxes of tapes and said, "There you go. That's tonight's show." And I said, "Well, where'd you get those from?" He said, "I've discovered, come with me. I've made a little discovery." And we walked back up on stage. The venue was empty and they were taking the gear down. We walked back up on stage. He opened a door. We walked down a corridor, and behind the stage was a fully equipped recording studio hidden away. That was recording the bands and artists that appeared at this club.
So it was like an official racket going on.
It was an official bootleg racket from this club. And he said, "Well, there's your souvenir. I just went in and I just took the tapes off of them. So, we've defeated one bootlegging operation, but it makes me wonder how many more sort of setups like that there was."
And there must be quite a lot, I would have thought, of XTC gigs that were recorded directly off the desk. Is that true to say, rather than?
Yeah, I think our sound man for most of the touring years, Steve Warren, has probably got quite a few gigs on cassette, because he'd usually run a copy off of, he'd usually run off any gig that we did. It's just a revelation that I'm discovering the kind of like, I'm seeing the 77, 78 band for the first time today.
And from that, so I was just thinking that thing of you could listen without ego. So I'm putting words into your mouth here, but can you listen without ego? And so you're not just listening to what you were playing, but also how the whole band knitted together.
Absolutely. If anything, I'm listening more to the band as a whole. Before, if I'd heard live stuff, I'd just be thinking, "Oh, you got that chord wrong," or "Ouch, that's a little bit out of time of you, Andy," or "Oh, there's one note wrong in that little run up you did there," or whatever it was. Your singing's out of tune because you're trying to do that fancy run at the same time as singing. Do one or the other, boy. But that's why Dave used to do all the fancy stuff live. I couldn't do the fancy stuff and sing.
And you must have had that thing as well when you were playing live, that there were just certain gigs, every fifth Wednesday, when suddenly it would all click and everything would be even better than ever.
Well, it was kind of 1 in 10 gigs were legendarily good. And it was something like that amount, because if there's 4 people in there, but excuse me, my voice is a little hoarse tonight, a mixture of pollen and singing along with these tapes. The 1 in 10, because 4 people on stage, somebody might have a bum night. So there's 4 of those to consider.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I don't know what's the mathematical number. If there's 4 people on stage and 3 of them are having a good night and somebody's having a bad night, there's got to be some weird linear kind of curve of amounts of, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like dice throws. Anyway, so you got 1 in 4 people. Then you could have bad monitoring on stage. Then you could have good monitoring on stage and everyone's playing great, but the outside sound is bad and there's something wrong with the outside sound. Or everything is perfect and the audience aren't interested. They don't know who you are because you're in some remote outpost in northern Canada, and they just don't know or care about who you are. Or the sound man's having a bad night and he just, he's had a row with somebody, the lighting man or whatever. And there's another thing. If the lights aren't happening or the power goes in the venue, but about 1 in 10 gigs, everything would come together and it would be just, you would be totally and utterly in heroin nod out bliss at the end of the show, because everything was just great. Everyone was happy. Everyone was flying.
And would you all, as band members, would you all agree with each other that that was a good gig?
Yeah, you didn't even have to say anything. It was just the faces said everything, the vibe in the air, everything. But you knew it if somebody was having a duff one.
Well, I never thought I was going to be talking to you about live gigs. Is it?
Well, me neither. It's just I had that little sort of personal revelation this afternoon. But you talk about what you want to talk about.
Well, yeah, I'm just thinking, because live gig is like almost like a taboo topic these days, and because it's so boring when everybody says, "Oh, are they going to get back together? Are we going to play live?"
Well,
and you have been saying that since 1982.
Yeah, the answer is no.
Yes.
But it doesn't mean that we can't talk about it, dissect it, joke about it, whatever.
It happened.
It's done. It was like, oh, World War II was so much fun. Yeah, well, it's over now.
Yes.
We had a time machine. I could take you back, and you could storm the beaches or whatever you want to do. But it's a moment in history. It's done.
Actually, how much attention have you paid to people like Fossil Fools and the live cover bands that are keeping in Australia and America and the UK?
Yeah, some of them are really good. Somebody sent me a link with, oh God, I can't remember where they were, and they did a fantastic Melt the Guns that was probably as good or maybe better than when we were doing it live. It was really excellent. It was an American. It was a sort of a fan gathering. I think they do it every year.
All right.
But I was really astounded how good this Melt the Guns was. And poor old Terry, who's had his EXTC project, is kind of knocked on the head by the virus at the moment. I feel really bad for him.
My ticket now is going to be a collector's item. It's one of those tickets for the gig that never happened.
Oh, I'm sure when this is all over and done with, we're all dead. I'm sure they'll be putting the show back on. Yeah? You mean the Edinburgh gig? Right?
Yeah. It was the perfect thing for me living in Edinburgh, having the gig I most wanted to go and see right on my doorstep.
But they'd be good. I saw some recordings of the couple of gigs they did in the pub in Swindon, the Vic. And it was pretty good, but I was just thinking to myself, you know what? When they've done a few dozen shows, they're going to be really good and really tight. You can't just pick up the violin and be Yehudi Menuhin on day one,
Yeah, well, if you think about if you're talking about 1978, 79, by that time you'd already been on the road effectively for 5 years or something, playing every.
On and on. Yeah. We didn't have so many pre-77. We didn't do so many gigs, and in fact, if we could get any gigs at all, no matter where they were, working men's clubs, pubs, anything, private barbecues. Private parties, we do them. We did a notoriously odd one. I think it was in Warminster in Wiltshire, where somebody said, yeah, we're having a little mini festival in our back garden, and we got a stage, and we got a PA, and if we go down there, you'll be able to play, and it'll be great. All the beer and food will be free. It'll be fantastic. Of course, you get down there, and it's pouring with rain, and they've decided not to build the stage. The PA they said they were going to get isn't there, and because it was raining and nobody turned up. So we decided to do a gig in their front room with our full equipment, with our PA, our stacks and drums and everything. And what's left of the audience, about 24 of them, just poked their heads around the door of the living room, because they couldn't get in there as well, because we were filling it up with all the gear. But before we went on carpet, we didn't really go on stage. Before we went on the carpet, we went to the local pub, and poor old Colin had somebody slip, he thinks, some LSD into his drink, into his beer, and he was feeling really interesting about halfway through the set.
XTC, the drugs years, the drug afternoon.
Oh, I remember the whole thing being an incredibly noisy farce, and me trying to sleep in the back of my girlfriend's What were those Shakespearean cars look like that had a long sort of half timbered back on it?
What would you call one of them?
Morris Traveller, was it?
Yes.
I think it was a Morris Traveller. It looks like a sort of, Anne Hathaway's car. I remember trying to sleep in the back of it. I just could not sleep and just spent most of the night wandering around the graveyard by where the car was parked. So a surreal ending to a very surreal gig.
What do you call that noise?
The reason for doing this podcast is that we're all in lockdown right now. We're talking on Zoom because everybody's talking on Zoom, and it's the way to go. And quite a lot of people are feeling a bit depressed and repressed and locked in. And so we thought that I thought it would be good to tell everybody that everything will be all right.
That's a real easy one. It's only 3-4 chords in it. C, C and G, and F. C, F, and G. There you go. You can't go wrong with those.
Can't go wrong with that.
Everything'll be all right. Be all right. Day and night time, and so on. And then you go up to a D. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
C, F, and G, and then you throw in a D occasionally. You can't fail to learn it. It's stupidly easy.
When you were writing it, were you thinking of easiness because of the sort of nursery rhyme quality of songs that you want to have in a children's movie?
I definitely wanted it to be nursery rhyme. I definitely wanted kids to feel immediately familiar and comforted by its message. To think that everything's going to be okay, and if the insects in the story are telling them everything's going to be okay, and they all have an example how they're going to make it better for James. I was really miffed not getting that, but I thought about it a year or so after the whole thing fell through, and it was a combination. It was the perfect storm of I was not going to get that job. It was the perfect storm of the animator, Henry Selick, really wanted me to do it, but Disney Core, or Disney Corpse, it can be pronounced, the cryogenically frozen Disney Corpse, had already chosen Randy Newman. They wanted him again because they'd worked with him and they knew they could get him dirt cheap. For their degrading terms, but they already wanted Randy Newman, and I think they went through the pretend rigmarole of offering me an appalling contract. I got so many $1,000, not very much. I think it was off the top of my head, it's something like $12,000, something like that.
And didn't you tell me there was a copyright grab as well, that they wanted all rights to?
Yeah, they wanted all the copyright in the songs for perpetuity, which meant that you were paid about $3,000 for each song, but that was a total buyout. And at the time, $3,000 was probably something like £2,000 or less, and they would have owned that material forever and could have done whatever they wanted with it. I mean, I don't know whether I was a stooge so that if I'd have said yes to those conditions, they could have then taken that to Randy Newman and said, well, Andy says he'll do it for only this much. And, Randy, oh man, I guess I'll do it even cheaper. So I was set up to fail with that because they really wanted Randy Newman. And
but it's such a shame because all of them are just such lovely songs, and you can just imagine them working so well in that movie. Yeah,
I although I like some of Randy's material, I didn't think his songs were that great in that film. They didn't have the straight to the kids' soul sort of vibe that I think mine had. I'm sorry, I have to be a little boastful there and say that.
Yeah, and did you find it easy to? In fact, is it easier to sort of take on a persona where you didn't have to be that guy from that pop group? You could just be the songwriter who was going to write a sweet melodic set of songs.
I was so excited to be asked. thought up all four, and a couple of others which never made the grade, but I thought up all four in a week. I was so excited. I thought, whoa, a Disney film, and I'm going to be writing the songs for it. Oh my goodness, what a dream. And yes, I wrote the four, the ones that you hear on the Fuzzy Warbles, those all fell out in 1 week. As everyone knows, I was not picked for the job, and poor old Henry Selick, as a sort of sop to me not getting it, he said, well, look, do you want to come to the British premiere, which I think was in Cardiff or Swansea? It was in one of the big Welsh cities. He said, look, I'll send you a stretch limo, and I'll give you tickets for you and your kids, because they were like 8 and 6 or something at the time. That's not the cost of them. That's their ages. And so we went in this ludicrous stretch limo all the way down to Wales to this premiere of it. And I think he felt a bit guilty about that, but it didn't stop him saying to me, are there any projects which you would like to do as animation that you think are great stories? And I recommended him Letters from a Lost Uncle by Mervyn Peake.
Oh, right.
One of my favorite kids' books, absolutely wonderful book that I didn't know about until my 20s. And he got a copy of it, read it, and said he loved it, and he could see himself animating that. And he contacted me and said, do you want to, if it does become an animated film, do you want to be thinking about writing some songs for it? So I certainly wrote the theme tune for it. Letters from a lost uncle, forthright through on the mat, letters from a lost uncle, what could be better than that? A trip around the world inside a giant balloon. Yeah, and so I already had the theme song going, and I think I had a couple more in prototype form. And I went for a meeting with a company that was going to be funding. They bought the rights to the book from the estate of Mervyn Peake. And I flew to New York to meet up with a company that were going to be putting the money behind it. The design work was going to be done by, oh God, I've just forgotten his name, Lane Smith. Lane Smith, the artist Lane Smith, did the Pinky Cheeseman and other kids' books. He was going to be the designer. He was going to design the characters. Henry Selick was going to be the animator. I was going to be the music writer. And the film was going to be made by Weinstein's company.
A lucky escape there.
What's his name? Weinstein.
Harvey,
yeah. And so I had to have a meeting with Lane Smith, Henry Selick, and myself and Harvey Weinstein. And we'll save that anecdote for another time. I've never seen staff so afraid of their boss. And I've never seen so much dinner down the front of somebody's sweatshirt. But we'll save the anecdote for another time.
Yeah, that could be a whole podcast in itself, couldn't it?
Yeah, but needless to say, Harv didn't get the concept. He didn't get he didn't understand the characters in the book. This seafaring, adventuring uncle who had a fake leg made out of a narwhal tusk, and he had a pet turtle called Jackson who carried all his art equipment for him. I mean, what is it with this fucking dog following him everywhere? What the fuck is it? It's a turtle. It's a dog. It's a turtle. Who gets a fucking turtle dog? Who fucking cares? I don't get the fuck. It was like having a lunch with Joe Pesci or something. Joe Pesci on steroids. So, needless to say, that film didn't happen either. But somewhere in the vaults is the theme song for Letters from a Lost Uncle.
I think, however bad the music industry is, the film industry must be about 10 times worse to work in.
Oh,
just
yeah.
Because nothing ever gets made. Everything's always in development.
I mean, you think you're going to lose your drawers in the music industry? You're going to lose your drawers 10 times over in the film industry.
What do you call that noise?
So how are you in this? Are you good at lockdown? Are you bad at lockdown?
It's absolutely nothing any different to how I live my life.
You're a natural lockdown-y.
I'm a homebody of the nth degree. I do miss occasionally going out to a bar or a restaurant, but I have to watch my drinking these days because I'm in need of a heart operation, and I find that any alcohol messes my heart rhythm up terribly for days afterwards. So I'm taking my life in my hands every time I have a drink these days until I get the procedure to sort it out.
So this is actually good discipline for you then.
Well, I had a stent last year, but that never cured the problem. And so this is, I mean, I had 2 pints of beer on last Saturday night, and I'm still suffering the consequences of arrhythmal heart now.
Yeah.
So I've got to be very careful, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But when I get my heart sorted out, watch out.
It's all round to the pub.
Yeah, it'll be Keith Moon too. But yeah, I miss. I usually go out every Friday with Stu Rowe, the musician and producer, Stuart Rowe.
Mm-hmm.
And we sit and put the world to rights over wine or beer and some food and stuff. So yeah, I'm missing Stu. You know.
What do you call that noise?
Okay, people say, what are the opening chords to "You're the Wish You Are I Had"? Okay.
Yeah, Andy, tell us what the opening chords to "You're the Wish You Are." Even how did you? I was just thinking about that. And Optimism Flames. How did you even sing those songs? Live.
Well, "You're the Wish" is quite easy to sing. What you play a beginner's lesson open G. The first G position you get with those strings ringing open, it's lesson 1. But you slide it all up so that your open G has still got the D and the G strings ringing open, but the other strings you're holding shut, performing whatever the hell chord that is. And it's a what was I supposed to do? Da 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 be, which is a strange change, I know. Da 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 da. And then, of course, B sets you up beautifully for the chorus, which is an E. All easy stuff, but it's that first chord you may not get. It's an open G slid up so that the G note is a C on the bottom, but you keep your other fingers in the same relative positions.
And that melody is just sort of fearless. It just keeps on going up and up and up and up. Was that like a challenge to yourself about how high you could get above from anything else?
Kind of, yeah. The most sort of shocking melodies are the ones that fall out and you don't know where they came from. You don't plan them. They sabotage you.
And then you go around asking everybody, have you heard this song before? Have you heard this one before?
Kind of, yeah. But if they're my melodies, the answer is usually, no, mate, that's too fucking weird.
Yeah, I mean, definitely nobody has ever done anything like that, the melody you've just done then.
Yeah. yeah, I'll give you that one. You won that one.
Well, I've just mentioned.
Did you mention Optimism's Flames? Yeah,
Optimism's Flames. Yeah.
Well, it's one of my pet chords. The you got Terry and Colleen doing the. That's quite regular. That's 4/4.
Mm-hmm.
I'm playing a closed chord of C up high here. I'm not very in tune, but I'm not going to dick around for half an hour trying to tune this up. And I throw with my little finger a G, an octave 3-note G onto that C. So I'm rocking between C7 and with an added G chord in it. So it's. see what I mean?
Yeah.
That's in a different time signature to the bass and drums. That's like, God, if I was Jacob Collier, I could tell you what the time signature is. But it's the actual chords that it's based around. The bam, that rather magical chord there. I have no idea what it's called. I've used that several times. It's actually the beat town chord. But if I like a chord and it's got a nice exotic flavour to it, I don't waste it. I wring every drop of goodness out of it. I mean, how many times have I used these chords? We'll have things like welcome to the garden of earthly delight. I'm not on good voice today, so. But it's almost identical chords to I wonder, wonder why the wonder falls. Da, 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 da. That's actually if you play a closed G but let the G string ring open and you slide it up to the B flat position, that's your Garden of Earthly Delights chord. Welcome to the Garden of Earthly Delights, which is that chord there is Roads Girdle the Globe, the intro recycled down a tone. Throw anything out, you see. You got to use your junk, Mark.
Am I wrong in hearing the last balloon in there as well, or is that different?
Last balloon is more sheesh. I couldn't play that on guitar, although I think I thought it up on guitar. Once it got converted to keys, it was like no going back.
No going back. Everything will be all right. Is done on piano, isn't it? On
Yes,
the recording. So
yes.
did you write it that way around?
I think it was written on a guitar. Mm-hmm. I'm much faster on a guitar. I can pretty much play anything I need to play on a guitar. But keys, I'm really idiotically slow at. I can find the chord I need, and I think I know what the next chord might need to be, but I then spend, at least 20 seconds getting my fingers into the position of the next chord, by which time the song has died, So thank goodness for a sequencer, so I can put my piano parts in one at a time, one chord at a time. Unless you get a good piano player and they can go, oh, you just mean this. That's what you're playing, isn't it? Oh yeah.
Yeah, but you've got to get them in the same room at the same time as you're writing. That's
exactly. I sat down with Dave Gregory and played him Rook, which was all done with me doing one chord at a time in a sequencer. And the bugger only went and learned it. It's really complex to play, especially the those sections, the kind of flying over the roof sections. It took me ages to build that, but he went and learned it and was, played it in the studio live on an upright piano, no sequencer involved. It makes you spit. If there was no carpet in here, I'd spit.
I'm going to go back to 2 or 3 songs there when you were talking about different time signatures. When you were doing that kind of thing where Colin and Terry would be playing one time signature and you'd be playing a different one over the top, was it a conscious thing? Was it just the feel of it? Were you kind of being intellectual and saying, oh, how about
no intellectual? It's all to do with you feel a funk or you feel a mood. Like Colin was telling us in the rehearsal room about a new song he was writing called Day In, Day Out. I should use a plectrum for this. And him and Terry had this very purposefully mundane boom, 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 boom. Very mundane, slow, walking, plodding rhythm even, but that was intentional, And we were talking about something to make it sound like machines. Let's see if I can remember how to play my part. It's like it sounds mechanical, but it's meant to. Meant to sound mechanical, and it's meant to sound slightly across the rhythm and not warm and not welcoming, because the subject matter is about drifting off into boredom at work and just longing for the weekend.
In other words, it was the subject matter that was driving you in that irregular pattern. It wasn't a kind of, let's sit down and write a song in 17
No. It's not that way around. They are the things we played either came up from discussion in rehearsals, where you'd sit the band down and you say, look, I've written this thing and I'd really like it to have a kind of blah 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 sound to it. Usually not like another band. You're usually describing an emotion or a situation, and how can we make this situation, this emotion, into guitar music. But as I say, that day in, day out, Colin didn't envisage. He envisaged the mundanity of the bass and drums, but I was really pleased to find the. It sounds like the sort of noise the gloppada machine would make. Name the film.
No, I'm not going to do it.
Okay, and I'm not going to put you out of your misery either.
Well, that can be a challenge to all our listener to go off and Google it.
What do you call that noise?
So there's an awful lot of description of moods and things. Like possibly. Well, one of the best arranged things that we've ever recorded was Man Who Sailed Around His Soul, where one of the few times that Todd Rundgren sat down and played nice with me was asking how I heard the song going, because he was fascinated by the melody and the chords and stuff, and the fact that I had it in a seven, a count of seven, which never rests. 7 4s and 8s rest, but 7 doesn't. It's always questing onwards. And I said, well, I would like it to be like a kind of cross between like John Barry spy theme, but with a beatnik edge, because the lyrics to it are all, examining the human condition. But I like the idea of the man who, the man with the golden gun, the man who haunted himself, the man who has a real spy connotation. So I thought, well, let's put them together, and let's put spy theme John Barry with beatnik. And bless his cotton ears, he came up with a brilliant arrangement almost overnight, I think.
And did the time signature change at that point?
No, it's still, it's like the beatnik club, the upright bass and bongos on the intro. Yeah, boom, 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 da boom, 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 da boom, 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 da boom, boom, boom. That's still 7s, but the scene is set. You've got the smoky beatnik cellar, late 50s New York or something, with people getting up and doing their deep human condition poetry. And that's kind of the lyrics to The Man Who Sailed Around His Soul. It's all about discovering yourself.
And once you've had an idea, whether it's you or Colin or whoever, and you take it to the band, and the band's all playing it, were you always gifted enough musicians to be able to cope with a weird time signature, or 2 weird time signatures happening at the same time?
I think if we ever thought outside of what we couldn't do ourselves, then you'd get another coming in. You'd get a trumpet player coming in, or you'd get a string quartet coming in. Do you see what I mean? If we couldn't play cello and viola and violins and stuff, we'd have to get string players in, or if we couldn't play flugelhorn or trumpet, we'd have to get those players in, or euphonium or whatever it was. And that was why Apple Venus was such a delight. It was the first time that I'd heard our music played by an orchestra at full belt, and it was, and you're stood there in the middle of it, and it was so thrilling. It's they're bloody loud, an orchestra. They're really, it's like Motorheads in Dickie Bows. They were Motorhead with white shirt, sticky bows, and a little hanky under their chin,
and a feet to Motorhead.
Yeah, Motorhead that are constantly looking at their watches because they want to go into overtime so they get paid more money, and they mysteriously dropping their violin bows just as you're about to do a take. I know the tricks.
But apart from that, like, you didn't have trouble if is it Runaways as in 5/4 time? You didn't have.
Oh no, it's English Roundabout.
English Roundabout. Sorry, yeah. Same on. But you could cope with that.
Yeah. The thing with Terry, I'm not so much the other drummers, because I don't know if the other drummers we work with were challenged in terms of time signatures that much. That might prove me wrong, but Terry, you could program Terry like a human machine. You could make him play. If you'd sit and said to him, "Okay, Terry, play me something in 5/4." "Oh, I can't fucking do that. I know who the fucking hell are you? The fucking hell you fucking think I am? I can't fucking do that shit. Fucking get off your high horse, Partridge." But if you sat with him and said, "Look, can you go thump, click, thump, click, thump, thump, click, and then hit that one there," like a bit like the Trogs tapes, if you've ever heard the Trogs tapes. You could literally program him, and he'd tell you to leave the room for a while, and you'd hear him playing this unusual rhythm, getting it fixed in his soul, and then you could play these unusual time signatures, like English Roundabout I think is 5/4,
and you would all find it straightforward enough to play along with a 5/4 rhythm.
Yeah, because what would happen is you would find the patterns in your hands. You don't think about counting. If you count, you're lost. Don't count. You feel it in your soul. You feel the pattern in your fingers. You let your fingers do the walking, as it were. But if you count, every time I tried to count something, I'd fall over.
Because I suppose that's like the effect of the listener has, is the listener doesn't sit there, unless they're particularly musically minded, thinking, "Oh, that's obviously a 7/4 signature." They just, they hear the song.
No, you get swept along. And the thing with English Roundabout was it's got to sound like scurrying cars going round and round and round this circuit. But the fact is, it doesn't matter if they sound a little bit like toy cars, if they're rickety and clickety. I think English Roundabout the sound of it came from partly watching the Beat playing. We did a tour with the Beat supporting us, like European festivals and stuff, and you stood at the side of the stage watching them most nights. And you're thinking, yeah, that's really good how they've knitted these small sounds together. We can do that pretty damn easy.
Yeah, I've got a mirror in the bathroom in my head now.
Yeah, exactly. And the fact that Colin and I had always wanted to rewrite, what's that thing by the one that goes da dum da da dum da dum da da dum da dum da da dum da 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 da da da. Yeah, who is that?
Yeah, that one. Yeah.
It's Pentangle, and it's called Light Flight or Night Flight.
I'll take your word for it, yes, but Pentangle,
yeah. Pair of us always wanted to rewrite that, and Colin beat me to it. But the combination of us both wanting to rewrite something in that vein, nagging sort of small turn-down electrics and or acoustics, and that nattering 5/4 drums, and then you're sitting watching the Beat every night, and you're thinking, you know what, we can do that. Piece of piss, we can do that. And so that, for example, is where English Roundabout came from. And it's to some extent, that's also the same story with Yacht Dance, because that's in threes, you see. And I've thought to myself, I've figured out what did I want to do? Why did it come out as a Yacht Dance? The truth was, I had a song called Honey for the Queen. Collecting honey for the Queen, collecting honey for the Queen. And I thought, shit, now I don't know what am I writing a song about being a bee for? I don't know what a bee thinks like. But I've been in love, and I know what the sensation of love is. And so I turned that into threes. See what I mean?
Yeah. And so is there an element of, when you were at that writing stage, of the head coming in more than the heart, or, were you sort of intellectually thinking?
The description of just moving the... I was annoyed with myself for trying to write about being a bee for a start. But I did like that, holding down the E chord up high and then moving the root note around. That made the melody to me. But I thought, let me try it in a different time signature. And I tried slowing it down and putting it into threes. And I think because I grew up listening on the radio to Messing About on the River, which is a song also in threes and also with that sort of tempo. Da da da, there is fine. Da 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 da. You're messing about on the river. And I'm thinking, what I'm playing it sounds like yachts. Of course, being in love is like being a yacht. You've got the wind in your sails, you're happy, you're moving around on the surface, you're not getting dragged down into the morass. Being in love is like being a yacht. And I found the song immediately, but I wouldn't have found it if I'd have insisted on keeping it in 4/4 and insisted on trying to write a song about being a honeybee. No experience of being a honeybee at all.
So then, do you have any messages to the people who are listening to this, who've stayed, if people have still listened all the way to the end of this thing, about being cheerful, keeping optimism's flames burning, and
actually, no, don't necessarily be cheerful. Be miserable if you want. Just be miserable if you fancy. Not all the time. Just go in and out. Be neutral is the best thing. Be neutral, because insanity lay either side of neutral. If you're miserable all the time, that's insanity. If you're happy all the time, that's insanity. Everyone should run on neutral and dip occasionally into misery and dip occasionally into joy. But I would, my advice for all the lockdown minions would be to do that creative thing you've always wanted to do. Start writing that book. But I don't know how to write. How do you write? You sit down and pick up a pen and start. That's how you start writing. Look, I'm writing. And don't start with any preconception. If you've ever wanted to write a book, just start, and you'll find it coming down your arm subconsciously, down your pen onto that paper. And you'll find before many days, many weeks, many months are out, you've got a book, and you didn't have a book before. If you ever wanted to learn an instrument, if you've got one of those instruments around the house, do it. If you ever wanted to write poetry, do it. But I can't write poetry. Yes, you can. How do you write poetry? You sit down, pick up a pencil and begin. It's really use this time. This time is a gift.
And as exactly coming back to that Yacht Dance example, if you've got a song that's not working, or a book that's not working, or a meal that's not working, then you can replace those things. But you've got that chord structure or that sequence of words. Or
absolutely, yeah, absolutely. If you've written a song about what it feels like to be a bee collecting honey, and it's not working, fold up the piece of paper, make a nice boat out of it, make a nice little yacht out of it. Sail it in the bath. There's no such thing as failure. One cannot fail. The best you can do is to succeed. The second best you can do is to fail and learn the lessons from that failure, because failure will teach you all the lessons you know to be successful.
There's a Samuel Beckett line about failing better. Fail and fail better.
Yeah, exactly. There's no such thing as failure. I mean, we used to put albums out that the public would not buy. They would not get in the top 100. They would not get played on radio. People never spoke about them. People never had them in their collections. Now we're supposed to be, oh my God, they're all geniuses. They're all genii. No, it was just a long series of failures that made us want to get the next album better. And they didn't buy the next album, so the one after that's got to be even better. There's no such thing as failure. It's all lessons that you could not buy.
You've been listening to Life Lessons with Andy Partridge.
Life lessons.
Andy Partridge, we'll have to have you on the XTC podcast many more times again in the future, because we haven't...
I don't know if I answered anything you wanted to talk about, but...
You gave all the correct answers. You've got 5 out of 5.
Good fun to chinwag.
Yes, it's been fantastic. Really good of you.
Dice all the words up and make me say intelligent things. It's the wonder of editing.
Yes, I'll do my best there. But thank you very, very much, Andy Partridge. You've been listening to What Do You Call That Noise, the XTC podcast. Come again.
What Do You Call That Noise?
The XTC Podcast.
XTClimelight.com. If you'd like to hear more podcasts like this, then it will be a great help if you could go to patreon.com/Mark Fisher, where you can become a pink thing, a humble daisy, or a knight in shining karma, and lend support to the XTC podcast. If you'd like to read more like this, then go to xtclimelight.com, where you can buy copies of my 2 books, the XTC Bumper Book of Fun for Boys and Girls, a Limelight anthology, and What Do You Call That Noise, an XTC discovery book. Thanks for listening.
What do you call that